Hey everybody, welcome to Money Law. My name is Yaasha. I'm a personal family lawyer here in beautiful California. We're going to talk to you today about weddings and COVID-19. So let's start first with the bride and groom because they are the customer. You are the most important people. This was supposed to be your year. It was supposed to be your special moment, your day. I'm so sorry that this is happening and COVID-19 is raining on your parade. But don't worry, you have options and you should be making moves today. Stop waiting if you're still waiting because all you're going to do is make it harder for yourself down the road. The first 6 months of 2020 is now passed. The next 6 months are coming. A lot of weddings have already been canceled, have already happened just at a different scale, or have been postponed to next year. Now I'm discovering from some of my brides and grooms that their weddings, they can't even find a venue for next year. They can't find the same date. They're thinking about choosing a different season. And if you're a bride, I know what you're thinking. If I move my wedding from the winter to next summer, do I need to change my colors? What does that mean for my flowers? What does that mean for my cake, my dress, my groom's dresses, all of the above? Do we have a dance floor? Is it going to be outdoors or indoors? What happens next, right? Okay, start here. Your wedding right now, what's the date? Is it still planned for this year? If it's planned for this year, you've got problems. All right, so let's focus on, are you ready to downscale your wedding? Because a lot of states will have rules that says you cannot gather in a crowded mass. So that means you need to make a small, intimate family wedding and potentially postpone the big party until next year or the year after. And I know that sounds like a far, far time away, but imagine this, if you're a bride and you can be engaged for one whole year, what kind of activities can you do for yourself? What kind of activities and events can your bridesmaids plan for you? There's a lot you can coordinate here. You can still make this a fun experience. There's still a silver lining. Don't get bogged down by, if I can't have this one date next year and I have to move the whole thing, then I don't want to get married at all. I have some friends that they have totally scrapped the whole wedding. They've lost their deposits and they're going to City Hall, getting their marriage license, and they're calling it a day. And then they plan on having some big family party next year, but they're not making plans for it. And chances are they might not have it. They might have a dinner or something. And maybe they'll have a reunion anniversary. So those are options. But I know most people, most of you are not going to want that, especially if your wedding is supposed to be coming up or upcoming today. So the first step you want to do is go look at your contracts, because in your contracts are your options written out. Most of the time you've paid a deposit, either for the cake, the photographer, the wedding dress, what have you. And chances are what I want you to do is just assume you're not going to ever get your deposits back. That's not necessarily meaning you can't get them back, but when you make that assumption, you are helping yourself get rid of your anxieties. When you just think that money's gone, how do I focus on moving forward? When you focus that way in your planning, that money can come back. It will be a plus. Chances are you're not going to get the deposit back, okay? Unless your contract explicitly states it. Now, in addition to that, what you want to do is there's 3 things you can look at in your contract. The first thing is what we call force majeure. Force major, that just means an act of God. It might not be titled as a clause. It's usually at the very bottom of the contract in what they call the general provisions, where the print actually gets smaller and you're wondering, why is it so small? Oh, because this isn't really focused on the main terms of our contract. This is focused on the contract in general. That's what lawyers say. I'm a lawyer. But what that means is if an act of God happens, if a severe act that is out of human control occurs, then no one has to perform anymore under this contract. Notice this is highly, highly dependent on your state and your state laws. If you're in another country outside of the United States, highly, highly dependent on your region's laws. But this is a very standard contractual term that is well known by courts around the world. And a lot of contracts have it. If your contract doesn't have a clause like this, then you, as well as the vendor, the parties to the contract, might still be on the hook to each other, or your state law or court law, as we call the common law, might have some kind of terms. Right now, a lot of people, they might be leaning on that. And honestly, it's very factually specific to your kind of wedding and what are the circumstances of your wedding. Is your wedding outdoors? in the woods with a lot of open spaces. So it kind of technically is possible that you can still have your wedding at the venue, but you just can't have as many guests because everyone has to social distance. Then force majeure is not going to work. It might not be your picturesque wedding, but that doesn't mean you get out of that contract. Or does your contract specifically state that an act of God includes pandemics? Some contracts, if the lawyers were good, if maybe you were drafting the contract or your wedding venue, usually what happens is the wedding venue goes online, finds a contract, copies it, reads it themselves, doesn't have a lawyer review, and says, I think this is good, we're going to do this. This is what happens. They can't afford to hire lawyers, so they just use the internet. And that's fine as long as it works when they need it to work. Now's the time you've got to look, is it going to work? Some states say if you have a force majeure clause and you start putting in sections on what kind of acts of God can happen. So for instance, if there's a hurricane that comes through and you can't have your wedding, if there's a flash flood, if there's a tornado, these were the kind of standard force majeure terms that you would see. After 9/11, you started seeing acts of terrorism come into these clauses. I guarantee you, after 2020, you will see almost always pandemics come into these clauses. But today, if your contract doesn't say that, and it says other terms, some courts might say, because you explicitly left the pandemic out of this clause, it doesn't apply. Or some courts might say, even though you left it out, it can apply because the state law is protecting you. The hard part is nobody will know except for you and your state and your attorney. I'm broadcasting to the world right now, so I can't say specifically if it's going to work for you or not, okay? But if you do have that, then you're in luck because that means you're off the hook. You do not have to perform on your contract. Does that mean you get a refund of your deposit? My answer is not necessarily, unless you've explicitly written that in the contract that not only do you not have to perform, meaning pay the rest of the money to the vendor, not only does the vendor have to perform, meaning allowing you to use their venue for your wedding date that's scheduled on that contract, but if it doesn't say anything about the deposit, that's probably gone. That's why I'm telling you, just assume it's gone. You'll have better peace of mind, but maybe there's a chance you can get it back. Right now, the wedding industry, they're basically shot for the whole year. Their whole year's salary is going to be zero. Nobody's making money right now. So they're desperate to keep your business. The scales are tilted in your favor. What does that mean? You have the power to negotiate. Maybe you don't want to take them to court to cancel the contract and get out of it. You can negotiate. And what everyone's typically doing is saying, all right, that's fine. We'll figure it out. The government will help me, give me some money. Come on, Trump, give me more money. But clients, customers, don't go away. We're just going to push you into the next year. So we're going to move you to the next year. I have a friend right now that's what she wanted to do. And now she realized her wedding date's gone. Her romantic, her perfect wedding date, gone. There were people that were going to have weddings on 2020 of some month, maybe their birthday month, the 20th on 2020. They wanted those numbers. Numbers mean things to people. And now they can't have it. Now, what is it? 2021? Or do we do 2021, right? 2/21/2021. Maybe that'll be your wedding date. That is a great number for the guys because that's how I remembered my wedding date, 9/9/19. I got very lucky that my wedding was last year and not this year. And that is why I'm so apologetic to everyone because I know how it feels. I truly do. It sucks. You've been planning all year long trying to plan it. But you still have options. If you don't have a force majeure clause in your contract, there's another contractual area of law that is run by the courts, usually not by statutes, called impossibility. It is impossible for me to perform on this contract. That is a very high bar because as you just heard from me, you could totally postpone your wedding and schedule it to next year. COVID-19 is not here. COVID-19 is here for the rest of our lives, just like the common flu is, just like Ebola, malaria, and all that. But we're going to get a control of this. You bet your bottom dollar, we're going to get a control of this eventually, not today, right? So if we get a control of this, that means it is not impossible for you to have your wedding at some other date. It's not impossible for this contract to stay in place. So can you easily get out of a contract arguing to a judge, it's impossible, we can't have our wedding, so therefore this contract is null and void? No. That is a very high bar to compete with. And even force majeure is going to be very hard to do. These are extreme measures, okay? These are not, I have to postpone and I want to change everything. Therefore, I don't want to be at this venue anymore. Therefore, I don't want this floral arrangement anymore. It's not going to work that way. But get this. In order for you to be considered in breach of contract, somebody has to sue you. Let's do what I like to call the freakonomics of all of this, right? If the wedding vendor is tight on cash, has no money, and you walk away from the contract and you just say, bye, Felicia, then what's going to happen next? They're going to have to take you to court. Depending on what value that contract is, how much money were you going to pay them, that will determine, is it going to be small claims court or is it going to be legitimate? We're in full court talking to a judge. You hire a lawyer, and let's do this. Do you know how much that costs? That's going to be a minimum of $20,000 easy, $10,000 on each side, easy, right? And it's going to take probably 6 months for them to start the court proceeding and end it. And then they can come to you saying, look, I got a judgment against you for breach of contract, pay up, right? So realistically, the business of law is court is expensive and it takes a lot of time. And most business vendors do not want to sue for breach of contract. They might just write it off. They might just ignore it and walk away. They might take the deposit. That is your easy way out and just say, all right, fine, whatever. And you might be in luck. So I have some people right now, they have international weddings. I don't encourage you to ever break your contract, but I am kind of trying to tell you the reality of the world. You have an international wedding, you have an international venue, and you have a contract with them. You've clearly given them a deposit, assume it's gone. And now you want to move your wedding to a different venue or to a different date or to a different country. Maybe you want to bring it back local because you're saying, with COVID being what it is and too many unknowns, I don't want to spend that much money on this extravagant party, which most people will realize international weddings tend to be cheaper than weddings here in America, right? So when that happens, do you think that company internationally is going to come to the United States, hire a United States attorney, sue you in the United States for breach of contract? Where was the contract written? The contract was written internationally. Does that contract even have jurisdiction to be in a court here, right? Or do they need to sue you internationally? And when they sue you internationally, how are they going to get you to pay up, right? So reality is, chances are you can be the bad actor here, breach your contract terms, it's a business risk, and walk away and see what they do next. That is illegal and a business risk. Are you going to go to jail? No, absolutely not. These are civil cases. You will not go to jail. But if they do sue you and they get a judgment against you, you're going to have to pay up for that breach. And it might cost a little bit more, especially if the terms of the contract says, if you breach this contract, you agree to pay our legal fees. So that is why I keep telling everyone, all my clients that come to me, what does the contract say? Let's start there. The worst thing you can do right now, though, is sit and wait. There's no more waiting. Now's the time to take action. Here's what I'm seeing in terms of the signals. This year is completely shot. Don't expect to have a wedding this year unless it's going to be something very intimate and small. We're not going to have a vaccine until maybe November, December. And by then, that doesn't mean we all get to come out and play. There's going to be a period of time where this vaccine has to be taken by everybody before shelter in place can shut down. If you have guests that don't take the vaccine, are they invited or are they not? Is that something you're going to do? That is a little ugly, and you don't want your wedding to become political. So chances are you're not going to have a wedding at the beginning of next year. My opinion, if you're going to postpone, start looking end of spring and on. I wouldn't look at the beginning of the year. There's a lot of weddings planned for right then and there. That's because they were postponed at the beginning of this year when we knew nothing about COVID-19. When it comes to managing your guests, managing your vendors, managing your one special day, I recommend being proactive. Start taking steps now, okay? And guess what? I would just postpone. I wouldn't necessarily sign up with new vendors. I would see, you can negotiate now. The ball is in your court. This year is shot for the wedding industry. That means they need customers. They're desperate. They are so desperate for clients like you. You have the ability to tell them what it is that you want, and you can start setting the terms. So, for instance, if you were going to maybe choose a new florist because your current florist probably got sick. I have a client that their florist died, COVID-19. That florist was a one-man shop, sole proprietor. Their florist is gone. Their deposit is gone. They haven't made the final payment because the wedding hasn't happened yet. Now they need a new florist. And you know what I'm telling them? You can negotiate. Nothing says you can't negotiate, right? So negotiate with them and say, listen, I want to book you for this date. I do not want to pay a deposit. I will pay a reservation fee of maybe a fraction of the deposit. And when 2021 begins, I will then pay the deposit. Give yourself 6 months to hold off until the start of next year when we know what vaccine exists and if it works. We might not have a vaccine this year. Who knows how the phase 3 trials are going? They just got started. They're just about to kick off, and we don't even know what the effects are going to be. So don't make any assumptions. So give them $100. Here's $100 now. Reserve the date. Why do I tell you give them some kind of piece of money? Because there's a quid pro quo. And in contract law, this protects you. When you give someone money in almost any state to reserve a spot, it doesn't even matter if it's $10, $1, $100. They are contractually obligated with you, even without a written agreement, to save that date. All right? That is a very strong area of law. Okay? So you can make an agreement with them. Hey, I just want to save the date. I'm not going to give you a deposit. If they say, well, I'm sorry, we require a deposit, then go find a new florist. You have so many options. The wedding industry is huge and highly competitive. If you can get out of your contract, great. Chances are it's not going to happen, right? If you want me to look at your contract, I can only help those in California, but I do have attorneys across the United States that I coach, that I also help. They can look at your contracts for you. But really, assume that your deposit's gone, postpone your wedding, communicate with your guests, and let's take some time thinking on what to do next. But now is the time to act. Stop waiting. It's not going to help you if you wait till the last month, because then you might get a call from your own vendor saying, hey, it's the month of your wedding and we can't do anything. And you didn't tell your guests and they're all wondering what's going on. Maybe you make part of the preparations, but then your venue says, we can't let any of your guests or you onto the premises because the governor has shut us down. The governor has said not more than 10 people in an atmosphere or an event. So we're happy to have your wedding. We will reduce the price this much, which they're not going to negotiate. They're going to make an offer and you're just going to be beholden to it. Or you can postpone. And you don't want to tell everyone 1 month before your wedding date, we're postponing. That truly sucks on so many levels for so many people, including yourself. You will give yourself more options if you start taking action now. I'm Yaasha Saba. This is Money Law. If you're watching us on YouTube, hit subscribe. Otherwise, hit me up on LinkedIn where I'm sharing these insights regularly. Remember, everybody, is it your money or is it theirs? Take care, everybody. Stay safe.